We had dealt with some of the agenda points, so today we will continue with the agenda. We were at agenda point number 4, the oral question time. I also will announce that 2 of the Island Council members, they are absent with notice. Island Council member Mr. Orlando Wilson and Island Council member Mr. Julio Every. So when we were at point 4, the oral question time, Island Council member Mr. Orlando Wilson, he had posed his questions and he was busy receiving those answers, but what we'll have to do in a subsequent Island Council meeting, he can go through that process again, seeing that he is not present here today. We also have, with permission of the Island Council, I would like to ask if we could add 2 more agenda points. We dealt with 2 last week. Number 8 was the memorandum of understanding, and number 9 was the joint letter from the Island Councils. But I would, due to the urgency of this, I would request if we could deal with 2 more points: the release of the acting island registrar, that's 1 more point, and then the appointment of an acting island registrar. So that would be numbers 10 and 11. We have no. Okay, so we'll add those in, and then we will continue with point 4 on the agenda, the oral question time. We proceed now. Island Council member so Mr. Vita Charles, you have questions or oral questions?
Good afternoon once again, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 points that I want to ask some questions about. The first point was in regards to the McCann Ferry, and that was also because of some concern that raised in the article in the best water, but also because of my own experience. And there was a recent letter on social media where a passenger on the McCann Ferry expressed concerns about the smell of diesel fumes on the vessel. And I also noted these fumes on the trip. I believe it was in November. And I thought maybe at that time it was just something, particular to that moment, to that trip. But clearly it's not, because someone else expressed the same concern. So as the Executive Council heard about the complaints before, it hasn't been discussed with the vessel operator. And if not, will the Executive Council reach out to the vessel operator to address these concerns? In regards to invasive species, we're talking a lot about the goats and the cats and so on. But recently in social media again, the government station alerted the public to the presence of the Cuban tree frog, a non-native species to that island. And considering the proximity and the significant amount of inter-island travel between our islands, as well as the transfer of livestock and agricultural products, this species could also be introduced here. And I think it's also worth mentioning that a few years ago I was on Antigua, and there it already was an invasive species. And so it seems to be coming down the island chain. And I think it was in a previous meeting that we talked about biosecurity and how what moves are we taking to preserve, the sort of the biodiversity of the island. Because for instance, these frogs are introduced, and they start competing with our own local fauna, and then that would be counterproductive to some of the efforts we already have. So my question is the Executive Council aware of this issue on City Stations? And is the Executive Council working with partners to prevent the introduction of this species on the island? And this also is, my next point is related also to connectivity, and it's more about the airlines. And it's about a recent interview where the CEO of Winner mentioned that a regional initiative to lower taxes on certain routes led to an increase in local travel. I think he was alluding to the day trips between Sable and St. Martin and also St. Martin and St. Bart's. While these fares have stimulated travel from St. Martin to Sable, they were primarily beneficial for persons traveling from St. Martin and residents on island, and I think rightly so. They feel left out because these fares will provide cheaper fares at a time when costs in general are extremely high. So I just would like to know if the Executive Council has reached out to WINET to discuss implementing these fares for travel from Sable. If so, what was the response? And because of PSO, would also stimulate local travel because of lower cost for residents and also visitors, as the Executive Council established a position in response to the reports that outline the benefits of a PSO. And in the same article, he mentioned that tourism-related taxes should be levied outside of ticket fares, as has been done on Bonaire. And has there been any progress with the research on the entry tax for Sable? That has been discussed over a few times. Next question.
Thank you, Honourable Council Member Mr. Charles. I now look to Commissioner Mr. Bruce Eggers for the answers to the questions. Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to everyone present and following the social media. With regards to the questions about the Mecana and the Center Fuel, ironically, we had a meeting with the operator yesterday to get out the station. But the concerns about the Center Fuel is not a new one. These have been addressed with the operator in the past, by both islands actually. The Mecana is on dry dock, doing extensive maintenance, whereas they're going as far as even change one of the engines. And we have been assured that this is one of the priority areas that will be addressed. Just that we hear it, I'm sure the crew also hears about the Center Fuel. So that's something that's going to be addressed while the vessel is on dry dock, and they expect because the maintenance period is so extensive that it will probably be on dry dock until sometimes towards the end of March. While speaking about Mecana, just a quick update about the PSO. There still isn't a PSO that's agreed upon, even though the Mecana is operating under the same terms of the one that expired. But the goal is to sign the PSO next week. There's still concerns about the amount of subsidy and being able to maintain the current rates, and that has become even more of a focal point now that they have been assessed by the tax department because of some of the crew sleeping on station some of the nights during the week. So they are trying to make them pay taxes because of that. This is being discussed with the tax department. It has also been raised with Basin Cat to see what's possible because they're not there full time, they're not even registered on the island, but they're trying to find a way to levy a tax onto the service. So that could have an impact onto the rates, but for now the PSO is being signed with the current rates while we continue to find a solution for that, and hopefully that is something that can be positive development in the coming weeks. As for the question about the invasive species, there has already been a few instances where the tree frog has been identified on Seba, but we do believe that it has been controlled. It hasn't been that we've seen bunches of them. There's been one here, one there, and as far as we know, that has been controlled either by the local that's seen it or by the SCF who has been called in to assist. Biosecurity is one of the priority areas of the net, so there is significant attention to see what measures can be taken, and already with the new harbour and the plans for the existing harbour, combined with a whole proposal that was sent in for food security, there is quite a bit of attention to see what measures can be taken by not only the new port but also the old port to improve biosecurity. So that's definitely onto the radar. As for the questions about Winner and the day fares and PSO, a few weeks ago the CEO from Winner visited Seba and met not only with me but also the Director of Tourism about the operations and the plans, and the topic of the day trips from St. Martin was quite a big discussion. The reasoning about why it's only done one way and not being offered to passengers leaving from Saba, Statia, or St. Bart's is that they're trying to fill empty seats. So according to their numbers, flights coming to Saba, the first flight, for example, comes to Saba with space, whereas the flight leaving Saba in the morning is mostly full. And the same can be said in the afternoon. Flights coming back to Saba are mostly full, whereas flights leaving Saba back to St. Martin has space. So the reason why they offer these cheaper day fares is in order to try to fill the legs with a space. So based on those discussions, there isn't necessarily a willingness now to offer those rates to Saba, Statia, or St. Bart's, simply because, according to him, those flights are primarily full anyway with the regular traffic. As for the PSO, I believe we've been quite clear in the past, on every level possible, that Saba supports having a PSO in place where not only the frequency is regulated but also the rates, because I believe we have the most expensive 12-minute flight anywhere in the world. I'll be in the Netherlands in a few weeks, and this will be one of the main discussions I plan on having with second chamber members, because right now there's a process of changing the legislation which would even allow for a PSO to be possible. Right now, if you look at it technically in the law, it's not possible. An amendment has to be made into the existing legislation, and that is something that is being worked on right now. But what's lacking is that I don't know if it's political support, but it's support from some of the ministries to say, well, once it's possible by law, about making budget available, because of course in The Hague everyone has the habit of pointing fingers, and this is one of the instances where everyone looks at BZK and says, well, you're the coordinating ministry, so if there's going to be a PSO, you have to foot the bill, whereas they see it quite differently. But that's still something that's ongoing. As for the taxes and what's going on Bonaire, the initial research was completed. I'm not sure of a presentation where the findings was also given to the Island Council. I know a presentation was given to myself as commissioner and some of the tourism stakeholders just for feedback. I can ask for an update if the same presentation can also be shared with the Island Council. So that's something that I can look into. I doubt it's a problem. And now the next phase is to see what the next steps would be for implementation. Do you make exemptions for certain groups? What lessons can be learned from Bonaire? So that's where we are right now. And this is not something that can be rushed, because of course it takes time to find the right system, go through the testing phase to make sure everything works as it should. But that's where we are right now. But the intention is to still go towards having that model similar to Bonaire, but of course at a different level, because we are a two-stop destination. And I believe those are the questions that were posed towards me.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Zegers. And if also now, Mr. Charles, that concludes the first round. The second round, we have follow-ups, the votes.
In regards to the Makana ferry, I mentioned that the taxes were concerned. Maybe you could allude on that a little bit more, because I wasn't clear what type of taxes you were talking about, or how it would impact the service. Whether it's personnel taxes or some other service taxes. And then also, one of the concerns is that, when we talk about the Makana, I'm also concerned about the quality of the service offered. if you go to the water air under and so on, you look at the service offered there, and I'm not saying it has to be exactly the same because it's a very different environment. But I feel like when the mechanical presented as a board, the service, like if you look at how the board is sort of degraded over time, wear and tear, use and so on, the service isn't the same as when it first started. And I think that, if we're asking people to pay for the service, we have to set a standard. And that standard is simply not being set or being kept, for that matter. And I think that also has an effect on people's willingness to use the service. And if we are particularly using public money to preserve and maintain the sort of things important that we set the standard for what that should look like. Because I actually think we should be spending more money so we can have lower fares on both airline connectivity and on sea connectivity. But it's very hard to, say why we are paying this amount and what we're getting out of it, or what passengers paying, is simply, in my, I would say, a bit unacceptable. It basically gets you from here to there, but how you get from here to there leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm just also wondering what those discussions are about. What kind of quality do we want to maintain? You mentioned about the tree frog, the Cuban tree frog being found on the island, and I'm surprised to hear that you said it had been found on the island because I never heard anything about it until Stacia actually mentioned that they had it on their island. So I'm just wondering, how have we alerted residents to the present, and how can they identify, and what can they do, or what should they do when it's identified? Because there might be cases that have gone unacknowledged, and then we're allowing it to multiply, because I understand they're very prolific in the way that they proliferate. Then you mentioned the PSO, or rather you actually mentioned the seats, and that they're trying to sell undersold seats, which is something important, I think, because it's important for them to fly both ways. But I'm not sure how we're measuring if lowering the fares would also stimulate higher demand. Because right now, people are basically just paying, top dollar to leave the island, but we're not also looking for new opportunities to increase the amount of available seats and at lower fares. Because the last time I think I looked at the price of the ticket on the way there, round trip, it was $250. Now if you don't pay for your baggage online, it's $20 or $15 or $20 or $30. So there's just a lot of, it just continues to increase. And if you look, for instance, in Europe, and on these low-cost carriers, you're paying sometimes $30, $40, $50, and then maybe you're paying a little extra for your bag and for whatever else. But like you said, for the 12-minute flight, and there you're talking about, 45 minutes to 2-hour flights, where you're paying significantly less. And you can visit much, and we're just talking about Winter Semantic. So I really think that's something that we need to have a discussion about, and that's why the PSO is so important. And that's why I asked about what is our position, because while I know, of course, that we think of PSO is good, I haven't seen it necessarily established on paper, a discussion document, a white paper, or some other sort of document that clearly that says this is SABR's position on a PSO. So at this point, and it's something that we can circulate and we can have political discussions about when we meet with different stakeholders. But now we just have what the national government, I guess, had requested, which was the research on the PSO. But then we don't say this is why we think it's important, what it would do, what are opportunities that PSO would provide for the island. So I'm just wondering if the executive council would be willing to put some effort into, having a position here, so to speak. And in regards to the entry tax, I agree with you that it's important to have, with the entry tax, I think it's important that there is some more information shared, because right now, because of, I think, Bonair's position Bonair took, other islands are looking towards it, and then you see their different opinions on it. I think when we finally make a decision, we have to make an informed decision that that's the best way to move forward. So I'm looking forward to gathering more insight into what decision the executive council will take in that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charles. I'll also afford the other island council members the opportunity to pose questions based on the answers provided in the first round by Commissioner Seger. Island Council Lady, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Zegas, for your responses as well to these questions. I think the PSO has done something important to all of us for some time, and we've been continuously discussing it, particularly with the previous government in the Netherlands. During the visit of State Secretary of Bezalka when he was here last, it was a topic we brought up, the PSO, and it didn't appear that this was a priority for him, as he was looking towards more innovative ways of travel in the future through drones and etc. So this was not a priority for him. So I think as a government, it's also important that we maybe look at a different approach when dealing with air travel. And in this sense, maybe instead of just speaking with Bonair, because a lot of the cost in the ticket is actually taxes as well imposed by the government of St. Martin and through the airport. So maybe we should look at a different approach as well. And if it's something that hasn't already happened, maybe we should start also having conversations with the government of St. Martin through the Minister of TIA in this situation, but also with Princess Juliana International Airport to see what possibilities also lay there. Because I fear that if we wait for a PSO, it may not come, especially under the current administration. And maybe we should start looking for more creative ways between our two governments on how we can reduce cost. Because I believe also with the reduction in this already would stimulate more inter-island travel. And I believe that might even be more profitable for Bonair in the long run. So just a suggestion, but also the question is then if any communication has already taken place with the government of St. Martin or Princess Juliana International Airport, or is this something that can be done? And that concludes my question.
Thank you. Island Council Lady, Ms. Matthew, any follow-ups to the question, the answers provided by?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you guys kind of summed it up well, but I just wanted to add for the Makana, you spoke about quality, but I just wanted to know if there was any discussions on the schedule. So for the routes and to have more of maybe like the day trips to station, seeing that banking, but also other things that we could do that way instead of maybe using St. Martin. So I don't know if those were discussions as well. As you said, I would be signing the PSO next week. So just wondering if there was anything on the schedule.
Okay, thank you for the questions posed in the second round. Commissioner Zegas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the additional questions. Yeah, I think it's a bit difficult to compare the two services. You know, the service of Makana versus the service of the ferry that takes people to the islands of the Dutch coast. First of all, there's a big volume difference, and we can have questions about whether some things are subsidized or not. That was a long discussion, and we've talked about the dredging of the passage and all kind of things like that. I mean, that's an indirect subsidy to ensure that how that ferry operates. And I believe it was during my Civil Day speech I mentioned about the $250 million investment to improve the ports for one of the areas that could improve the ferry passage. If you look at what's being offered to the McCanna for 2 islands, the first 2 years there was 2 million euros available, so $1 million per year. So that was for the first 2 years of the service. Now we have 1 million for 2 years to make it work. So the budget was essentially cut in half, and the service hasn't really changed. And if you look at the wear and tear, we don't have to look far to see the sea conditions. The McCanna, they travel whether it's rough or it's very rough. The boat's always going, and that has significant wear and tear onto the boat, especially a boat of that size. So it's always hard to keep that standard without investing the standard of quality. I'm not questioning safety, but the standard of quality, whether it's seats or whatever have you, without investing huge amounts of money each year. One of the delays of why the PSO hasn't been signed sooner was because there were questions about some of the financials, and was McCanna making more money than what they were claiming. And an independent deep dive was done into the books, and it shows that they're barely making ends meet, and that's with the subsidy. So if we want to talk about maintaining existing prices or even cheaper prices, and wanting to have a high quality service, that calls for money that's simply not available right now. And do I think that how the quality of service should be improved? Of course I do, and that's a discussion that we have every single time. Do I believe that if I look at a passage, should the rates be lower? Yes, I of course agree with that as well. But then the money has to come from somewhere. And right now, when this money is done now for the 2 year period, there isn't even any certainty that more money will be made available that the service can even continue. So that's part of a bigger discussion, because funding for McCanna has not been made structural. But I do believe the quality of that was offered in the beginning is not the same as what it is now. But I believe that's not so much out of not willing to offer the same quality. I think it's more a financial question. And as for the schedule, there will be one change made to the schedule once the PSO is signed. We are going to attempt to do a day trip to Statia from here, but it will only be once a month as a pilot to see if there's really a demand. So normally when the ferry would return on a Wednesday, they would, instead of going to Statia automatically, once a month the ferry would sleep on Saba. And then first thing in the morning the ferry will leave from Saba, and then go to Statia, and then the schedule continues as it is right now. So it would give the opportunity that people can have a full day on Statia on a Thursday if there is a need to go to the bank or something like that. So that's something that we're trying to regulate. Well, will be into the new schedule once the PSO is signed. As of when that starts, that's something I think that will be better known next week when we know for sure that it is signed. But that is something that will be part of the new schedule. As for the PSO and lowering of fares and increasing demand, I use this example all the time when we closed the airport for a month a few years ago to repave the runway, and that was done during the September period, when of course we expect to have very little passenger movements to begin with, because that's just a very slow period of the year. And I believe that may have been one of our busiest months with visitors, just because it was so easy to travel between Saba and St. Martin with the ferry, because we had multiple ferries running. I believe it was like something like $50 for a round trip fare, and I think everyone was pretty much overwhelmed by how well that was received and how many people actually traveled. So I am a firm believer of when fares are lower, that it would increase demand. But then, that's something that we don't have any control over. That's something that is directly determined by WINIL. And, that's also one of the reasons why the PSO is so necessary, because that regulates frequency and rates. And as for a white paper, I believe that's something that we can put together quite shortly, because, for the most part, everyone knows the position on what they want out of the PSO. Is it going to change anything right now? I don't believe so, but it can be done. Until the legislation is changed, it's not even possible right now, technically by law. But as a process of changing that legislation, and from what we see and understand, there is a willingness to change the legislation to make sure that how it is possible. As for the taxes, this is actually an effort that's ongoing. There is a committee of the 6 Dutch islands, I believe it's called a DCCA. The airport manager is one of the members, well, she is the member that represents Sailor. And one of the main discussions of this committee is actually to lower the regional taxes that's being charged by the airports. So that is something that's ongoing. It seems to be going in the right direction. As to when we will see the results of their intentions, I'm not 100% sure into that, but that is the initiative that's already being taken up by the BCCA. With regards to the reporting of the Cuban tree frog, these were just informal Facebook posts by persons that saw it. I do believe that how the SCF had posted something about it, right after one had been seen, but that's something that I will check again. But I agree, more information should be forthcoming about it so people are aware, and that's something that I believe we can coordinate better with the SCF. But I do believe the SCF had posted something on social media about it, but that's something I can verify.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Zegas. That concludes the questions posed and answers provided for this. We now continue with the oral question time. Island Council Lady, Ms. Saskia Matthews. No, we finished the round.
I got something for A1 to follow up something else there. But
The other question. Any follow-up questions you asked? 2 rounds. What did I? Are you telling me or what?
You want to answer?
Okay, Island Council Lady, Ms. Saskia Matthews, you had some questions or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone again. Posed some questions in a previous council meeting, but I just put it back again. Basically on issues like the cost of living and the things that the government could do. There are a lot of concerns on the island about how the work permits are handled, and of course the housing is a big thing. So I have 4 questions and more, but I break it down. What other possibilities are being investigated to reduce the cost of living? And that is with regards to the food on the island. Are there any plans to move forward with basket of goods? Curious to know why the island government doesn't carry out the island tours, and maybe it happens, I'm just not aware of it. Are there any plans to protect the housing market unstable? I know that protecting the housing market involves a combination of policies and other strategies. We have talked about increasing affordable housing and possibly assisting first-time buyers to reduce the barriers to home ownership. But what are your thoughts on monitoring and regulating investments? And Is there an update on the sale of the social houses owned by public entity Sabre to Result? Those are the questions.
Okay, thank you, Island Council Lady Ms. Saskia Matthew. We begin with the answers. Island Council Member Mr. Commissioner Hager.
I can start. I can start.
Oh, you start. Okay, you start. Commissioner Zegers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regards to the question about reducing the cost of living, as it has been discussed a few times already about the quick scan on the cost drivers, that has been recently completed. I believe that report should have been shared with the Island Council already. For a long time we've pointed fingers as to what we think does have such an impact on the price of goods, but that's why we request to have such a quick scan done. Based on the findings of that quick scan, we will be drafting an execution plan, and this will be done in collaboration with the relevant ministries, because of course we don't have all the tools locally. We also want to involve the local stakeholders to see what they can do about it, because there are some recommendations there about ordering in bulk, selling more off-market brand items, but admittedly that isn't one single measure into the findings that like a magical wand that just drastically reduces the prices. I mean, Sabre is at the end of the line. That's something that I believe we can all recognize, and we depend on many other factors that we don't have any control over. As for the basket of goods, also with the execution plan, before it's finalized, we will also seek the input of the Island Council, because I do believe it has to be a fully supported type of document. So we'll discuss it with the ministries, with the store owners on the island, and then we'll bring those findings all together to the Island Council. As for the basket of goods, I know this is something that many people ask about. In that report, it suggests that a basket of goods isn't necessarily a useful tool to bring down the price of goods. They look at having a broader approach where a broader range of items the margins reduce. So that's something that we will discuss with stakeholders, and it would be included into the execution plan. Another thing that always comes up is about having prices displayed, that people know what they're paying for before they go to the counter. A decree has been made, and what we were waiting for was an enforcement strategy, and we recently received that. So we're in the process of formalizing that. That will be included into the execution plan, because I do believe that's something that's lacking right now, is people having that knowledge of what they're buying. So we want to have an all-inclusive type of package of measures. So will it have a huge impact? That's yet to be seen, but I do think that there's some room for improvements, and hopefully, with the findings, with the support of the ministries, and hopefully there's some leeway that we can, by bringing the stakeholders to the table, they're willing to also work along with us, that we can have a positive impact.
Thank you, Commissioner Zegers. I will answer the one regarding the question posed about the island tubes. The island tubes is being carried out in a modified way. Persons who they bring or send in their vacancies to the Department of Communication, CPR. It is placed there for 5 weeks, and if a business has specific requirements of such, they also are informed how to go about that. So the island tubes does. We continue now with Commissioner Heidegger, and then that will conclude the first round, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to council members. Question posed to me was, are there any plans to protect the housing market in Sabre? That was the first question, and yes, there is, but at the moment we are also busy working on the spatial development plan, and with this we are also exploring the options of protecting the housing market on the island. Along with that too, we have to also start to work on establishing a rent committee that would be there as a bridge between tenants and landlords. So, for example, when a tenant has an issue where a landlord wants to increase rent or they don't want to pay for maintenance services, that we have a committee that's there to protect both landlord and the tenant. This is something that is really needed, and it's something that we're busy working on. In regards to an update on the sale of social housing, there's a research that's being carried out. There was an individual on the island, I think back in the month of, if I'm not mistaken, December. I was actually off island. I didn't get to meet with the gentleman. He was here to gather information, to put together a research, which would be then shared with the relevant, with public entities and with an investor, hopefully, if they're willing to invest. And but along the way, the Island Council will also be informed when the draft is published. Because at this moment, he's not, the individual is not finished with the draft. I thought it would have been finished by this week, but apparently not so. So hopefully next week or week after. But I'll keep you informed when it's available.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hager. Okay, I'll begin with Island Council Lady Ms. Matthew. If you have follow-up questions based on the answers provided.
Concerning the island trips, you said there is a modified way we do it in a modified way. But what mechanism is in place to protect our locals? Like, so for example, if there are people on the island that can do the jobs, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that they have first preference before a permit is given up? Because sometimes, well, I know on Stacia, when they have the request, it goes to the labor department. This company needs this professional in a certain position based on the information of the labor department, and they can say, well, we have these on the island, and yeah. So just wondering how we protect our locals in this process.
Just that one. Yeah. All right, thank you. So that is a very good point that you make, because as you just alluded to the example of station, a list of the local persons who are unemployed or that could fill certain positions. So that is also something we as an executive council have spoken about with the economic affairs, to have those mechanisms in place that we can also have, the same type of thing, that we know who is seeking employment, and then that could be cross-checked also. So that is something now that we're building up the economic affairs, and something that we can put in place. So that's a very good point. As for the other council members, do you have questions based on the answers provided? Okay, so then that concludes agenda point number 4, oral question time. We continue with agenda point number 5, incoming correspondence and announcements. 5.1, we have Island Council incoming and outgoing correspondence list from November 26th until February 10th. 5.1. Okay. And 5.2 is Executive Council decision list.
November 26th. It's a decision list number 3.0.7, provision of food baskets. On December 18th, 2024. Number 3.1.3, tourism trade shows Q1 2025. And January 28th, 2025. We didn't note the number, but it's a basic free allowance public policy budget 2025. And February 4th, 2025, 3.1.6, 2025 energy subsidy.
Okay. All right, that is 5.2. So we have some flag points from the Executive Council decision list. Those will be answered in the subsequent Central Committee meeting. We now continue with 5.3. Written questions to the Executive Council in accordance with Article 35. Then 5.4 is answers to written questions to the Executive Council. So these are answers provided by the Island Councils from the Executive. Okay. That concludes agenda point 5. We now move on to agenda point number 6, update from the Executive Council based on Article 38 of the Rules of Procedure. We'll begin with Commissioner Bruce Eggers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 updates. During the week of March 17th, I will be visiting the Netherlands with a support group. One of the primary focus points during that week will be the implementation agenda for the CIVA package for 2025. The CIVA package right now spans the period of 2024 to 2027. So it's more so to have a working document about the goals to be accomplished during this year. There's still some points where attention is needed. For example, funding for digitalization, for professionalizing the internal control functioning, and also the VK-HAT, which is the licensing and enforcement. So those are some of the sticking points that we still have in basic CAP. We'll also be discussing the point I mentioned earlier about the whole thing with the quick scan on the cost drivers for the cost of living. That will be a major discussion, and I will also, amongst many other meetings, of course, and of course I'll be meeting with several second chamber members. And one of the bigger discussions I want to have with them, because right now there's a lot of attention to see what can be done to diversify the economies on the smaller islands. And there was a debate that was scheduled a few weeks ago that got postponed until it's either mid-March or early April, because there was a request to have the Minister of Economic Affairs present. So I will be discussing connectivity mainly with the members of the second chamber, because I do believe for us to really see our economy improve, we need to have better connectivity. I do believe that's one of the main factors, especially when you see, for example, the Scenery Hotel nearing completion. It's one thing to have rooms, but if people can't get here, that's an even bigger problem. And not just connectivity by air, but then also, a structural solution for the sea transport as well. So that's, some of the highlights of the visit that I planned during the week of March 17th. Of course, I'll give an update once I return. I would also like to give a brief update about the harbor project. I think everyone knows the contract was signed with the contractor in October. Right now, the contractor is busy finalizing all the technical drawings because it was a design and construct tender. I'm sure you get questions. I get questions. Nobody sees anything really happening on the island, but a lot is happening behind the scene. The technical drawings first and foremost, but then also work has also started with regards to work permits, because we see that as a risk that could cause a delay. So that's the process that's already started. There will be a 3D model of the harbor in April, so to build a full-scale model of the harbor in a wave pool, and that gets tested during mid-April. And there's a whole planning schedule. In the coming months, they start sourcing rocks because they need a large abundance of rocks at a certain size. Later in the year, they start making X blocks. That's the protection that goes behind the breakwater. The physical construction of the seaport itself doesn't start until after the hurricane season. But then it's scheduled to be built between the hurricane season of 2025 and 2026. But that's the marine structure part of it. Working within the parameters of the hurricane season greatly increases the risk, and as such would increase the price. So as much as possible, everything is being made and sourced ahead of time, that once they start, it goes pretty fast.
Thank you, Commissioner Zegers. Commissioner Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I had a question was posed to me by Councilmember Wilson, and it was in regard to recent travel that was organized by VVS and ZJCN to Colombia to revisit some health institutions that our patients are sent to for medical care. And I was actually going to give it in an update, but then he asked it in a question, and he's not here today. So do I still give it as an update, or do I give it as an update? And then when he said he don't present the question again, or?
Well, we see why.
Okay. So back in January, between the 17th and the 23rd, upon invitation from ZJCN and VVS, the three commissioners with a portfolio of public health from Saba, St. Eustatius and Bonilla was invited to go along with them to Colombia to revisit the health institutions that our patients are referred to for specialized care. I don't know the reason why it was organized only for commissioners to go along and not for other healthcare providers. That's something to do with how they organize the travel. So our first visit was in Cali, and in Cali we were able to visit two clinics/hospitals. One was by the name of Clínica Indianapo, and the other one was by the name of Fundación Valle de Lili. Both of these hospitals are renowned for their advanced medical technology and also skilled medical professionals. Before I went on this on this trip, I was asking myself a question of where Cali came into the picture for medical referrals from Saba, for example, to Colombia, because I know that in the past it was patients were only being sent to Medellin. But apparently we were being told that for the past 2 years now they have been sending patients to Cali. And that was because of the hospitals and also the advanced technology, which they thought was lacking in Medellin. So we were basically in Cali for more or less 1 day. And then we traveled to, while we was in Cali, we also got the opportunity to visit what they call our recuperation center, which is set up like a hotel. And it's actually 4 of them. And there's where our patients stay during the visit. So whether you're a patient or you was a patient that was hospitalized and came up out of the hospital, you will stay into these institutions, set up like I said, recuperation institutions, but they're actually hotels. And in there, everyone that works is more or less a nurse. So from the registration, reception, to the person that drives the car on the outside is a nurse. And also, what they have available is 24-hour service, nursing service, and also 24-hour vehicular service in case someone fell ill, that they could automatically just take them to the hospital or clinic. And this was all in Cali. Unfortunately, in Cali, we didn't have any patients from Saba, so I couldn't visit to ask how they were doing. I did get an opportunity to see one patient from Statia, but that's a Statia patient. Then we went on to Medellin. In Medellin, also we visited some clinics / hospitals, and also hotels. The hospitals visited was Clinica Cardioville, Hospital Pablo Tobon Uribe, and Clinica Insa. Cardioville is where most of our cardiology patients are sent, because they basically specialize into that type of care. I'm pretty much familiar with this clinic because I have been there once with a patient as a companion. Pablo Tobon, I know a lot of individuals there are also familiar with Pablo Tobon. And Clinica Insa was something that is like more or less kind of new on the scene. And Clinica Insa is known as a fertility clinic for couples or single individuals wanting to have a family. We did visit hotels where our patients stay. In Medellin is a little bit different versus Cali, where there's a recuperation center, more or less like a hotel setup. In Medellin, there is something similar, but only at one hotel where you do have a setup where there's nurses 24 hours. But it's actually a hotel and apartments. That's how they call it. At the other hotels, the nurses, if needed, would attend to the patient on a 24-hour basis. I was able to visit one patient, from Saba, but only the companion I had a conversation with and not the patient. And when I asked the companion how everything was going, he basically told me that they were satisfied with the services that were being given to them from the insurance company there, by the name of Kumeva, who takes care of our patients. All in all, I must say that it was a visit that was really needed to really get the insight of how our patients are being taken care of and the type of care they're given. But there was also a remark that was made that on our end, maybe the referral process can go a little bit smoother, with also the communication process. And that all lies with our healthcare provider, which is Saba Cares. A discussion was had with them to have a better communication, especially with Comeva, who is the insurance provider that take care of our patients in Colombia. And I hope that this does work out in the future. There is a planned revisit, but this time it would include the care providers on the island, such as Saba Cares, the department head from public health, and probably someone from the local pharmacy, because a discussion did come up about the list of medications, where one of the clinics in Cali was actually revising the list of medications that compared to what they would prescribe. So I think having a pharmacist there also would help with that. And then there's also a planned visit, which is not completely planned, to visit the Cass Islands, because we also do have patients that are referred to these islands. So that's Curacao, Aruba, and St. Anthony. But I really don't have much information on that. Like I said, I'm not the one directly organizing it. This is organized by ZJC and VBS.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hager. Before we continue, we need to take a break for 5 minutes. So it's now 2:10. We will reconvene at 2:15. So break of 5 minutes. thank you. We now reconvene. Right on time. Okay, we reconvene. The two commissioners have provided their updates, and I too will provide an update. Mine is about one of my portfolios, and that is namely the civil registry, the census office. As we all know, within government, and we have our system is set up on, as part of the Dutch state, everything begins literally and ends at the census office. So from acknowledgements before birth to birth certificates, marriage, divorces, and death certificates, and all the things in between are dealt with at the census office. And at the census office, it's also very important that we have a good system of up-to-date information. With that in mind, we are going to inform and continue to inform the public regarding, obviously trivial but simple things like if you change your address from one village to the next, it's also important to inform the census office. We're also busy ensuring that those who are in the system that is correct. That people who are there are technically on the island. There is, by law, if you are not on the island for X amount of months per year, then you have to deregister. So those are different things we are busy ensuring of at the census office, and it's taking place. I wanted to inform the council because in 2 years there's another island council elections, and it's always good to inform people way in advance and make sure everything is in order. With the residency permits in the system, it also happens that people receive the permits from the IND, but then they don't come to put it in the system here. So all those type of things is very important. So we're busy going to communicate those things to ensure that everybody is aware of their responsibility as well with regard to the registry at the census office. So I just wanted to focus on one of my portfolios, and then every meeting I can further elaborate on other portfolios. So that is the update, and I now allow the council members the opportunity to pose questions based on the updates provided. I begin with Island Council Leading, Ms. Elsa Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any follow-up questions at this time. I would just like to thank all three of you for the updates. And I'm happy that we added this point back onto the agenda because we hear a lot of things, but it's also important for the public to hear it as well, especially in elaborate explanations like you all did. So I just want to thank you all for the update.
Okay, thank you. Island Council Member Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also want to thank the commissioners for the updates. I think when I had talked about having a flag upon the incoming correspondence list, it was actually I wanted to thank Commissioner Heidegger for providing us with a report of his visit to the hospitals on Medellin. And I had also wanted to ask if it would be possible that for future travel for all executive council members, that we could also receive a nice summary like what was provided, because I think it just clearly gives some feedback on what we did and what you experienced on the trip, and just very informative. So maybe it would be something that we can get some more information like that for future reference. And in regards to, I didn't get an opportunity to follow up with some questions from Commissioner in the last round in regards to the connectivity, but because you brought it up in regards to the visit to the Netherlands, I'd also like to just maybe ask a few questions because what then is the intent of the discussion with the second chamber members, and how do we intend to provide them with information based, other than discussions, but what concrete information do we intend to provide? I just want to say that, because in answer to the question, the commissioner mentioned that there's no money for the PSO. There's no legislation for PSO, but also it seems to be no additional funding to continue the ferry after the end of this year. So that also creates some issues. And then also there's that we can talk about improving quality, but now we lack the, I guess, we're not sure that we're going to be able to continue even with the ferry itself. So I think I'm just curious as to how are we going to lay out our arguments in a substantive way. That it's not me questioning whether or not the commissioner can actually have a discussion about these topics. I think he's more capable, having spent so many years in this position. But I'm just curious, where do we, where is our point of departure, and where do we accumulate all that information and all of our arguments in one place? Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. And Councilmember Mr. Charles and Councilmember Ms. Matthew. Okay, so then there was just one question posed based on the information provided. Commissioner Zegers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the discussions with the second chamber members is more so to, convince them about the idea that budget needs to be made available. I do believe already that how the feeling of establishing a PSO is already there. Changing the legislation to ensure that it's possible. But the discussion about making funding available, that's still something that's lacking. And I want to give them some substance to maybe strengthen the arguments a bit, because and I know I've ranted about this so many times, but you've opened the door for me to do so again. So I would gladly do so. And this concerns the discussion about the RCN. I discussed this earlier in the week with the commissioner from Station, and she fully agreed with me. We can't talk about diversifying the economies of Sable and Station without having a discussion about the RCN. If you look at the tens and tens of millions of dollars that indirectly goes to Bonaire because of the establishment of the RCN, that's money that Sable and Station will never see. There's never going to be an opportunity where back offices and support staffs and you name it, everything that comes together to ensure the RCN works. That's never going to be split up. That Sable Station is a piece of that pie. Great for Bonaire. If you speak to Bonaire politicians, they'll tell you that you can gladly have a lot of the RCN offices because they don't want them there. So this is nothing obviously against Bonaire or the Bonaire government. This is more so how that pie is being shared. And right now the pie isn't being shared correctly. And that's going to be the starting point for my argument to build with the members of the second chamber, that there's no such thing as BESS. BESS is something that was just thrown out there for general legislation, wall BESS, fin BESS, that type of legislation. But it was never the intention that an empire would be built on one island, whereas the focus and the funding goes there because of that empire. Whereas two smaller islands gets drops in the bucket because of it. So I do think that that's a political. I think there's political space there to make that argument that Sable and Station is not being treated fairly. And when we want to have a discussion about diversifying the economies of the two smaller islands, it starts and ends there, because we're not privy to that type of money that gets generated automatically, whether it's through visits by civil servants, because we were in the build when one of the island council members said how they're overwhelmed by the number of requests that they get for meetings, and that's mainly because of civil servants going to Bonaire because of RCN, people that we don't see. That's tax revenue, that's hotels getting rooms filled, that's restaurants, you name it. That's indirect income because of RCN. It's all the support systems, maintenance, service suppliers. No Sable business or station business benefits from any of that. If a table or chair needs to be put together here on Sable Station, a group from Bonaire is flown to Sable Station to do so. because there's one service contract, and that service contract goes to Bonera companies. So that will be the approach. It's not a white paper approach that you've requested that we do. I think that's a different approach, more so to have our feelings about why it's necessary. But this is more so to start a political discussion about quality and how money is being spent on islands. So that's how I will approach my discussions with the second chamber about connectivity.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zegas.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up, because and like you said, you I opened off on red for you, and I don't think it was a red. You have me convinced. I think you, without a doubt, can provide clear arguments and politically persuade people why these things are important. But I want to also point out why documentation is also necessary. But we had the water island because in your earlier statement you mentioned about the quality of our service in terms of mechanic could not equal that of the service provided.
Well, it can, but it costs.
It costs. But
It should.
when we were in the Netherlands and they were talking about lessening the amount of trips to one of the islands, they could point to, they could clearly elucidate the economic number, the economic cost of losing X amount of ferry trips. So when you talk about the number of civil servants that travel to Bonaire, I think it's also important to say what is the economic impact that it has there versus what the economic impact would be here. And we can't say that without the research. What every trip brings, what every office brings. And that's why I talk about the documentation. Because it gives a clear picture, or clear raw picture, of why it's important to do certain things here. Because I support it. I agree that we need to have certain institutions established here. Not only because it would minimize bureaucracy, but also because it has economic spin-offs. If you look at the European Union, they have offices for different departments and different, I guess, I don't even know what we call them in that sort of construction, but they established all over Europe because everybody is vying for a piece of that pie. And we need to also buy some of that pie here too. So that's what I wanted to say. I think it's just as important to have this documentation as just to have the political arguments.
Okay, thank you. And customer, Mr. Charles. With that, that concludes the agenda point number 6. We now continue with agenda point number 7, motions. Okay, then number 8 and agenda points 8 and 9 we had dealt with last Thursday. The memorandum and the joint letter, we had dealt with those two. We now will proceed with agenda point number 10. First, agenda point 10 is the Island Council proposal, the release of Mr. Cronin as the acting Island Registrar for the Island Council of the Public Entity SABA. On March 29th, 2023, Mr. Cronin was appointed by the Island Council as the acting Island Registrar. Mr. Cronin informed the Island Council of his desire to resign from this position, and a new replacement has been found. So the reason for this decision is during the absence of the Island Registrar, it is important for the Island Council to have an acting Island Registrar to allow for the regular work of the Island Council to continue. The Presidium and the League of the Triangle support the appointment of an acting Island Registrar from within the organization as soon as possible. The legal basis is the WALBES Articles 130, 133, and 135. Is there a need for a head count, or can we agree on this proposal as presented to release Mr. Macronian? Look around, yes. So Mr. Macronian is released as the acting Island Registrar. That is agenda point 10. Agenda point number 11 is the proposal to appoint an acting island registrar. And the proposal is to appoint Ms. Matilda Coutier, who is currently the legal advisor for the public entity. And she has experience to replace the island registrar during her absence. And legal basis is the same as the one I just read off. So can we agree to this proposal as presented? Is there a need for a headphone? Then in accordance with the rules of procedure, the appointment is agreed upon to appoint Ms. Matilda Coutier as the acting island registrar of the public entity. Congrats. That is agenda point number 11. Agenda point number 12 is the closing. I thank everyone for their attendance and their patience for allowing us to continue this Island Council meeting today and have it concluded. So thank you all for your attendance and looking forward to the next Island Council meeting. With that, this meeting is now closed.